Hello, ladies and gentlemen of the internet. My name is Dark, and today we'll be reviewing Ultimate General Civil War. Now, as the name suggests, this game is based upon the American Civil War between the North and the South. This is a little fun fact for anyone who doesn't already know this. Now, if you guys are familiar with the Total War series and you heard of a series of mods referred to as the Darth mod, the guy who made the Darth mod also helped develop this game, which is one of the reasons why I decided to try it out for myself. Now, there are three main features with this game. Campaign, which is the bulk of this. Historic battles, where you're able to reenact any major battle within the Civil War era. And custom games, which is a similar concept, only you get to mix and match however the hell you want. For the time I've played this game, I mainly just focus on the campaign. I've played the Union faction first, then the Confederacy, just to see the differences and overall compare the two. After you play your initial tutorial mission and set up your general, who's going to be your main guy for the entire campaign, you have a choice between choosing the Confederacy or the Union. Like I said, I did Union first, but for my gameplay you see here, this is the time I played as the Confederacy. Once you're finished with the initial tedious stuff, you get thrown into your camp menu, which has 4 tabs as you can see on the bottom. The first is one of the most important ones, the Army tab. This is where you manage your corps, your infantry, and so on. Now you'll have 4 different types of units that you command. Infantry, skirmishers, cannons, and cavalry. You have infantry, which are the backbone of your army. You want to make sure you have a lot of these guys and they're armed pretty well. You have skirmishers, which are good at holding your flanks, acting as scouts, and they're pretty good snipers. You have artillery, which, you can't go wrong with artillery. And you have cavalry, which are pretty much there just to die, so try not to have any of them if you can avoid it. Each corps is divided into divisions and brigades. Now, as you can see, I have 3 divisions with 4 brigades in each of my corps. You'll have opportunities later on in the campaign to expand your corps and your troop numbers overall. Initially, though, your numbers are quite small, with only 1 corps and roughly 2 brigades, if I remember correctly anyway. Speaking of the initial stuff, especially early on in campaign, you want to be very careful with your resources, because you can easily screw yourself over for what is to come later. That said, whenever possible, try to give your units better weapons than what they initially give you, because you're going to get to the point where you still have your crappy farmer's rifle, and the enemy's laughing at you because their guns are at least twice the range of yours and you can't hit anything. Each of your troop units are led by an officer. They could be anywhere from as low as a captain to as high as a major general. Now, these officers can die and they will affect the units in the battlefield, but it's kind of randomized between them either dying or being wounded. The difference obviously is, 1, it's gone forever, or 2, you have to wait a certain amount of turns before it comes back, but we'll get more on that later. Next, we have the Armory tab, which allows you to buy and sell various weapons. Which, if you're like me, you'll be very glad when you sell those stupid farmer's rifles, because in my honest opinion, I believe that chucking them at the enemy's face is a far better chance of hitting them than with a stupid musket bullet. Now here's where I notice one of the key differences between the 2 factions. Depending on which faction you choose, there are going to be certain weapons that'll be unavailable for you. One example would be the Confederacy's Richmond, which you'll never be able to get playing as the Union. Unless, it's captured somehow, but then it'll be very, very limited in the amount. The next tab you work with is the Barracks, which is your officer managing tab. Here you'll get to see if your officers are wounded, how long it'll take for them to recuperate, and any that you have in reserve. Personally, I try to keep at least 2 or 3 officers in reserve, because there will be various amounts of times where your officers get wounded and they'll be unavailable for battle. So it's very nice to have an officer reserve, because otherwise your troops are not as effective as they would be initially. And lastly, we have the Career tab, which is probably the most important tab here, right next to your Army one. This is where you get career points, which are very important to manage efficiently if you don't want to get screwed over. Trust me, you want to specialize in politics and economy. Almost everything else is secondary. Except reconnaissance. Try not to put anything into reconnaissance. Reconnaissance is pretty useless. After you're done messing around in the army camp, you go to the battle map, which is where your missions are. You'll have a mix of minor missions and a major mission. Now, don't be that guy who skips the minor missions and goes straight to the freaking major ones, because the minor ones do give you some buffs if you complete them with a victory, and also they give you some resources that may or may not cover the costs of what you went through in order to complete the mission, but that's irrelevant right now. Also to note on that, there are certain missions, very few, that you don't control your own units, you control borrowed units, and honestly you can just send them all to die regardless of, managing resource or anything. It's perfectly fine. Almost all of these major battles go through different phases. Now these phases can be anything from days that pass by to as simple as you have one corps that's attacking the left and another corps that's attacking the right. Now as you play through these missions, you'll find out that regardless of what faction you choose, almost always you're going to find yourself outnumbered. And by a lot. It's kind of ridiculous. There are times when I find myself defending a certain area and the enemy is overrunning my positions with God knows how many infantry, and I'm screaming at the screen for them to send my reinforcements over here because it is a shitstorm, and I am somehow surprised that 300 infantrymen are holding the line against 10,000 other enemy infantrymen. Now, kind of what I hinted to here, if your units have enough veterancy to them, they can hold the line against overwhelming numbers for a time, but it just gets repetitive that this happens over and over and over again, and you're questioning, why does the Confederacy outnumber me when the Union is like twice their size? It's one of the things that kind of turned me off when playing this game. Not that I couldn't manage mostly, it's just recuperating all of those losses that I accumulated, even though the enemy literally took at least 2 to 3 times the damage I did. And then the next mission, they're almost perfectly fine, while I'm barely alive. Which is why I also said you really need to manage your resources very, very efficiently. Now, population resource, that's fine. You get those accumulated regardless. You can waste population all you want, but the money is where it's key. You have a choice to replenish your units, either with veteran or recruit troops. Now, recruits are pretty much free with the exception of the weapons you gotta provide them with, but because of that, they degrade your overall unit's performance. But veterans, of course, are very expensive. Now, they maintain your unit's overall stats, but if you don't pay attention, you'll run out of money very, very quickly, and then you'll kind of be screwed. Which is also one of the reasons why I suggest putting everything you have into politics and economy, because this helps solve the problem a little bit, but you still need to be aware of what the hell you're doing. Also, this reminds me, when you're in battle, whenever possible, flank the enemy. If you shoot them in the ass, they can't really do much. It hurts their morale, and morale makes them run like they're freaking chickens with their heads cut off. At least for a while, anyway. Now granted, this becomes harder to do, especially later on if you're constantly outnumbered, but it's still a very key tactic that you should implement whenever possible. It'll make these battles a lot easier, but still hard for most. Another tactic you want to keep in mind is keep your units in forests or in towns whenever possible. Cover factors in a lot here too. Now, if you're not sure how much cover a unit has or what it gives you, there are tabs that go on during battle that tell you these things. Again, you need to be aware of what's going on if you want to play this game efficiently. Now, overall, I do like this game. It's just there are certain little details that piss me off, and also just constantly being outnumbered. That annoys the shit out of me. It's not that I can't win, it's just that I know I'm going to get fucked either way. Which is also why I remind everyone that unless you're someone who enjoys a challenge with strategy games and also managing everything that's going on, this game is probably not for you, even if you're a history fan like me. Overall, I give Ultimate General Civil War a 7 out of 10. So what do you guys think of this? And to those of you who've watched and played this game before, tell me, are there any particular battles where you somehow won against all odds and you have no idea how you pulled it off? I'd actually love to hear some of those stories. Leave a comment below and let's bring this discussion to a head.